Illuvium will be the first Web3 AAA game studio and will fundamentally transform the gaming industry. What is going on, Metaverse? If you're a total noob when it comes to what is Illuvium, you're in exactly the right place. I heard that Illuvium would be the first Web3 AAA game studio and had no idea what any of that meant. In order to have an understanding of that, you've got to have a good basis for what is blockchain technology, for what are the game genres that Illuvium is putting out, for the investing side of it. If you don't want to spend months getting up to speed, I'm going to share that all with you today. So stick with me and we'll find out what it is that Annie knows about what is Illuvium. So to explain this all, I'm going to go through each word in that phrase, first Web3 AAA game studio. And so we're going to start first with, well, first. In 2020 and 2021, several interesting projects emerged that began to integrate blockchain technology with gaming development. Now, you don't need to be an expert in blockchain technology to be here any more than you need to know what is an Unreal Engine or Amazon Web Services to understand software. For now, just think of it as the current technology that's driving the game development. We'll talk about it a little more in the future. During this time period, several studios began to integrate interesting use cases. For instance, Decentraland sold nearly 100,000 plots of land at a valuation of almost $500 million. And also in that same time period from 2020, 2021, Axie Infinity became the fifth largest gaming studio in the world at a valuation of almost $30 billion. Now, in some cases, those valuations have proven to be unsustainable. But in the same way that when Pets.com and eToys.com and many other .com companies crashed in the early 2000s, it didn't mean that the internet was not value added. What it instead showed us is development needed to continue. In the same way, Illuvium, along with a number of other game studios, has been funded coming out of that recognition that there's real value in the technology of blockchain being integrated with gaming. In fact, since 2020, nearly $2 billion of funding has been put into various gaming studios. With over 200 members in their development team, Illuvium was one of the first of these projects to launch and is certainly one of the largest game studios building on the blockchain. From that launch in 2021, they will be rolling out the first of their gaming titles later on this year, all built on Web3 technology. So what does Web3 and the blockchain mean for us as consumers? Well, in order to understand Web3, first we need to have an understanding of what Web 1 and Web 2 were. Web 1, or the first version of the internet, essentially was filled with static websites. These allowed one-directional communication to take place, sort of like a virtual newspaper, if you will. That Web 1 instance was a read-only type of web. Web 2 began to allow sharing of information in both directions, so website owners could send and also receive feedback from their visitors. Large groups of people could communicate online, and services like social media, adaptable websites, forums, video streaming would all emerge in this Web 2 space. The Web 2 web was a read and write web. In Web 3, blockchain technology allows us to have a connected network of individual computers that control content behind things such as websites, instead of a single point where each website is hosted on an individual server. Now, when you hear blockchain technology, you probably think about things like Bitcoin or the transaction of finances across different entities. This is partially true, but the real use case of Web3 technology is having a publicly visible ledger that can confirm who owns specific assets in a safe way. The Web3 web allows us to have read, write, and own capabilities in a virtual world. To understand this, I think an analogy would help. Let's imagine a gaming company changing from Web 2 to Web 3 technology in the same way that game studio would change countries that it existed in. So let's think for a second, what if Tencent, the software development studio, was to move from China to the US? They would have a number of key changes. For instance, they would shift from the yuan to the dollar. Their company headquarters would be relocated from Shenzhen to maybe San Francisco. And a number of key elements of their company culture would change as well. So they might move to a greater focus on remote working conditions. Their public holidays would change. Maybe their compensation and benefits packages would be different. In the same way, if you have a software company moving from Web 2 to Web 3 technology, you're going to have similar types of changes. So, for instance, instead of using dollars, that company might begin performing transactions in Ethereum instead. Their location would move from a set of data storage within a data center somewhere that their company owns to a decentralized network of computers that are running virtually. And their ethos or company culture would change as well. So in the Web3 space, they would probably have a greater focus on individual property rights, decentralization of key decision making so that gamers and investors might be more involved in the running of the company, and a focus on greater transparency, as that's a core element of the Web3 space. Illuvium, as a Web3 gaming studio, is run by a decentralized autonomous organization, called a DAO for short. What this means is that the global or decentralized group of players and investors that are involved in the project have key decision-making capabilities. They'll elect what's known as a council that runs for a set number of months. That's called an epoch. And in this case, that council is going to make key decisions about the direction of the game studio, investing, transaction details, and so on. Based on that direction that's set by the council, the development team for the project, in this case Illuvium, is responsible for the execution of those key decisions as well. So the first and major key decision that the DAO has set for Illuvium is to build an ultra high quality or AAA game. So what does AAA mean? When we talk about scoring, we'll commonly use a numerical system. For instance, if you miss 2 questions out of 10 on a test, you're going to get an 80%. When we want to do precise evaluations, using a number is typically best. But in some cases, we may have a more subjective evaluation that we want to perform. There's maybe a range that we want to target, not a specific quantitative value. In this case, we'll often default to using a letter instead of that. So using the English language, commonly we'll use A, B, C, D, and F to reflect different quality ratings. If you're wondering why we don't use an E, it's because there's often confusion about the word excellent, and you don't want to give the sense that an E is actually better than an A. You also may recognize that we use this type of a subjective rating system for a number of other projects and activities. For instance, building energy ratings are given in a typical A, B, C, D fashion. When we talk about different cuts or quality of meat, or when critics provide reviews for concerts or shows, they'll also use this type of a subjective scoring system. Now, gaming projects are also often evaluated using an AAA scoring value. In this case, this means that that game or game studio is providing the highest budgets, they're developing top-tier audio and visual effects, there's compelling gameplay, the lore and the world environment that's been created is also top flight. There's no direct standard for what is a AAA game. It's more a situation that you know it when you see it. Incidentally, if you find my quality of content to be AAA, I'd appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, or comment on this video. This allows me to continue providing additional resources like this for you on Illuvium and other titles in the Web3 gaming space. Now, back to Illuvium, they have a 200-person development team that's focused on developing AAA game titles. What that means is they want to compete with the very largest blockbuster game studios in the traditional gaming space as well as in Web3 when those launch later on. With this development team, there's a much longer lead time for the actual building of the game titles themselves, and there's also a higher risk that the games will fail and the cost would be greater. This ensures that the titles are going to be better than other single-A or double-A games, and this allows Illuvium to be focused on both bringing in players and keeping them to their game itself. So I'm assuming that you know what a game is, and I'm not going to belabor that point. Instead, I'll highlight how Web3 games differ from traditional Web2 games. The most important concept here is that of asset ownership, or you can think of it as virtual property rights. What that means is that the items in the game that matter belong to you, not the gaming studio. The way this works traditionally in games is if you get a particular item or land or hero or character, that information resides on a server that's owned by the game studio. Let's say that you get a legendary weapon like Thunder Fury in World of Warcraft, or maybe you purchase a Peely skin in Fortnite. Those are actually owned by Blizzard and by Epic Games, the gaming studios, not by you as the player. You have no rights to those assets, and when you sign the terms of service for playing those games, you indicate that those game studios have the ability to take back those items from you for any reason at all, or for no reason at all for that matter. Now let's play this out if we think about this in relation to the physical world. If you were to go out and purchase a several $100,000 new car, would that vehicle manufacturer be allowed to come and take the car back from you for some reason? Similarly, let's say that you rented a saw to go out and design and build a particularly amazing table. Could you be expecting that company that rented the saw to you to be able to come back and say that because they provided you the ability to make that table, it's therefore theirs? No? Well, if not, why is it different in the virtual world? Just because a gaming studio provides the software that allows those items to be generated, why should it be the case that they actually maintain the rights to it? In the case of Web3 games, they provide that key information, those items, that land, in a way that it's stored on the blockchain. And you then, as the player, can transfer it to a virtual or digital wallet. Just like a physical wallet, as long as you protect it and keep it safe, you retain the rights to those items, and you can then trade or sell or buy from other people using your virtual wallet instead of being dependent on the game studio. Incidentally, if you're newer to the Web3 space and you're interested in more digital wallet security, I'm going to put a description in the links, including some particular software and hardware solutions and some other resources that you can look into further. Now, if I'm going to move back to the specifics of Illuvium, we need to highlight the fact that they're building not just a single game, but they're actually a game studio. So when it comes to games, there are over 5 million game titles that have been launched over the last 50 years worldwide. But there are less than 10,000 game studios that exist today. What that means is that for successful game studios, they have to deliver multiple titles that are high quality in order to keep gamers coming back to purchase more in the future. In this case, Illuvium is planning to compete against the largest of these gaming companies. To do that, they have 3 different highly interconnected games launching later in 2022, with more planned for future years. Kieran Warwick, the founder of Illuvium, has indicated that they intend to compete against the likes of Riot Games and Epic Games and Blizzard and so forth. To accomplish this, they have to appeal to gamers that are focused on different genres of games, not just a single game title, as well as gamers that have different willingness to spend, both from a dollar standpoint and also from a monetization or mechanic standpoint in their games. If you're interested in doing a deeper dive onto this, check out my video on how Illuvium will onboard more than 1 million gamers. The first 3 titles that Illuvium will launch this year are the Overworld, an open world exploration genre of game, the Illuvium Arena, which is an auto battler, and Illuvium Zero, which is a base builder style of game. In its most simplistic form, the Overworld is an open world area that allows you to travel around with your character, a ranger. You can explore the world itself, collect and gather specific resources, and most importantly, find and capture alluvials. As you capture these alluvials, you'll be able to go out and capture even stronger ones from other regions within the world, and you'll be able to use these characters in the other titles throughout the game studio. The first of these is in the arena itself, which is an auto battler, as mentioned previously, that allows you to use strategy of deciding a specific composition of alluvials to match against an opposing team. The positioning of where you place each of your alluvials matters greatly to how they'll be effective in their overall combat. You'll be able to compete in 2 different primary modes, the first being in a PvE type of style against the computer AI or against other players in the arena, where you'll have your deck versus theirs that you can elect which alluvials to place on the battlefield. At the same time, land plots throughout the Illuvium Zero game will exist and are owned by individual players. The players can build up their bases with the purpose of generating fuel to be used to sell into the main game that allows the rangers to travel across different regions. They'll be able to scan for alluvials on their land and use that to find and develop blueprints that allow armor or other items to be crafted for use, again, in the arena itself. The main advantage of having these 3 titles in the way that Illuvium has designed them is that there's a high interoperability of assets, meaning that everything is connected, and so fuel in one game funds the travel in another. The capturing of alluvials in the Overworld allows you to use them to be played in the arena or in future games that launch. This sharing of resources ensures that you'll have much greater longevity to the game itself, and players will gain value for years to come. The other unique mechanism behind Illuvium is their funding approach. Now, there's a token called the ILV token that exists that represents a share of the Illuvium Studio company. In this case, it's a share of the financial as well as the governance or management responsibility. You can think of it like a share of a stock that you're probably more familiar with. Now, the piece that's unique to this is that 100% of the game revenue, whether it comes from the gameplay itself, from additional merchandise, from sales of items back to current or future gamers, 100% of all of that revenue comes back to holders of the ILV token and to owners of the Illuvium land. In this case, the development studio holds a percentage of the tokens, so unlike most gaming companies, the interests are fully aligned between the game development studio and the gamers and investors in the Illuvium ecosystem. This is very different than what you see from traditional gaming companies. Since you're still with me today, I can assume that you're interested in potentially learning more about Illuvium. In order to do that, I'm going to provide additional resources in the description below, including links to my guild Discord, asset management services, as well as onboarding guides and other tools that may be beneficial for you. I wish you an exciting journey into the world of Illuvium with me, and I hope to see you, whether it's in my comments, in Discord, exploring the overworld beside me, or potentially across the table in the arena. Now you know what Annie knows about what is Illuvium.